webinar. Really want to thank ACRL for helping out with this. And my name is Ray. I am the convener for the ACRL Leadership Discussion Group. Really pleased to have Jessica Clemens, who is the AUL for Research, Education, and Outreach at University of Buffalo, to be presenting this topic. She gave this talk back at Annual this past June in Chicago. I want to thank her again for agreeing to do this. And I wanted to just let everyone know that I will be sending out an email possibly this week or next week on the Midwinter program. There might be a discussion group if you're interested. If you are going to Denver, it will be on leadership building and linked data. So we have a couple of folks, one person in particular from Stanford coming in to speak as well. And I'll try to put that as a recorded webinar as well, so people can follow along or they can watch when we do the session. So thanks again, and I'll give it to Jessica.
Great, thanks so much, Ray. So I'm going to do my best to monitor the chat. So if you have any questions during the chat or if there are any problems, like I said, I'll do my best to try and monitor that. But thanks everybody for joining me today. I'm really excited to build out the presentation that I delivered as part of a panel at Annual in Chicago this past June. And I want to thank Ray and Alma Ortega for inviting me to deliver this webinar. I'm very happy to be here today. So a little bit about what I'm going to share with you all. Unfortunately, I'm going to talk about myself a little bit too much, and I'll tell you why. I want to share some career advancement strategies because I suspect that some, if not all of you, are interested in advancing your careers. I want to talk about how you can develop skills even if you're not in an explicit leadership position. I want to tell you how I help other people see themselves as leaders. So one of the things that I really enjoy is being part of a group and helping others see how they fit into organizations and helping to support them. I also want to mention some of my many shortcomings as far as the profession goes, and hopefully there will be a little bit of time for discussion towards the end, and we can do that via chat, or you can mute or unmute. We'll have to see what makes the most sense. So like I said, if anything comes up, I'm happy to stop my presentation and address a question right in the middle. All right, so where am I right now? As my PowerPoint slide would indicate, I'm at the University of Buffalo Libraries. So about our institution, this is, and I've been here since January, and in my role, I'm the AUL for Research, Education, and Outreach. So most of the faculty librarians are in my group, and I provide leadership and strategic direction for the arts and science, the arts and humanities, social sciences, science and engineering librarians, health science librarians, special collections, university archives, government documents, and scholarly communication. So my unit is about 38 people. Most of them are faculty members, and we do have some professional staff. And the University at Buffalo, we're a member of the American Association of Universities. We're a research-intensive university. Our strengths are especially science and engineering and medical sciences. So we're opening a new medical school with a new medical library this January in our downtown campus. So it's a really exciting time to be here, I think. And the pictures I'm showing you, they're just images of our three locations. We have a north campus, a south campus, and a downtown campus. The University at Buffalo is about 30,000 students, about 20,000 undergraduates, about 10,000 graduates. And the libraries were about 128 people, give or take retirements and hiring and things like that. So I'd say as far as ARL, that's the Association of Research Libraries go, we're probably right in the middle as far as size goes. So, like I said, I just began at the University at Buffalo this past January, so I haven't even been here a full year yet. And this is a very different role for me. So I went to college at a very small college. We were about 2,000 FTE. I got my graduate degree from Clarion University in Pennsylvania, which was about 6,000 or 7,000 students. And then as I began my career in librarianship, I actually started as a science librarian and the head of the science library at a small private liberal arts school in Ohio. And then I moved to a small public doctoral granting college. That's the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, where I was a science librarian for several years, and then I was the interim library director for a few years. And then I moved to the University at Buffalo. So this is the largest institution that I had ever been. I went from managing, so as the head of the science library, I managed 1 FTE and about 20 students. As the interim library director, I managed about 11 FTE, and now I manage nearly 40 FTE. So it's a very, I've seen some significant jumps, and especially moving to the University at Buffalo because it's so big. It's easily 3 times as big as the largest institution that I've ever been at. I think that it's it's not the traditional trajectory that I've seen, and I think that what I hope that you'll be able to get out of this today is you don't necessarily have to have a stepwise career trajectory. You can build skills to make bigger leaps at the right time. And I think, it's the reason I have this door here is, I've been told no more times than I've cared to remember, but I believe that every door can be opened. Just because it's closed doesn't mean it'll never open. You need the right lock, or you need the right key for the right lock. I'm not the best with analogies, but I try very hard. And so I think it's a matter of picking which door you want to open and trying to figure out which tools, which skills, and which opportunities to pursue in order to make the door open at the right time. And my approach to doing that, well, one, I love memes, but my approach to opening the doors at the right time and having the right skills to do that is just by doing all of the things. So I've been really engaged in local, regional, and national organizations since I began as a librarian. So in library school, I was the president of, our chapter, our student chapter of the ALA, and then I was able to attend ALA. And really, I've been very, very busy. I have a few publications. I have, lots of national presentations, and it's been something that I've loved to pursue. But I really feel like I've been doing all of the things, and that also includes non-library things. So ways to be part of the research enterprise. So it's not just about libraries, it's about being a full member of the academic community. And I think that that's something that I see some of our junior faculty not engaging in as quickly as I think they should be or could be if they want to advance. So very much moving full steam ahead. It's one of the things that I think some people are hesitant to do is waiting too much. So a lot of the mentoring that I got as a graduate student, it was very much built around steps. So you do a local presentation, and then you do a regional presentation, and then you do a national presentation. I think that if you want to advance as quickly as possible, you just need to be looking for the right opportunities, not it's time to do X, Y, or Z. It's what is the best thing for me right now at this point in my life. And I think that that's a narrative that I'm trying to change a little bit, especially with the junior faculty that I'm able to mentor right now. So, like I just mentioned a little bit, I think a lot of this is about being enriched by the whole academic community. So rather than focusing on just what's happening in the library, and this is something that is really important to do at small institutions, at non-library entities, and, of course, inside the library, but looking at the whole institution, what are some examples from outside the library profession? So what are the departments doing? What are the disciplines saying about, key library issues? So what does the department say about open access? What does this, society say about open access? I think that that's something that really benefits the libraries in a lot of ways and benefits you as a professional in a lot of ways. One thing that I recommend everybody do, and that I do very regularly, is especially, and I really miss having this interaction online, so I'm imagining we're having a little bit of a conversation right now. But whenever I'm in a meeting, especially if it's a meeting where, maybe it's my first one, or, I'm the most junior person in the meeting, rather than coming out and saying everything that I want to say first, I like to observe how people run meetings and observe how people kind of operate in a room, and that's been really helpful for me to help understand the politics of a situation and the politics of the different personalities in the room without sticking my foot in my mouth, which I've done on more than one occasion. And I also really, because I'm able to go to many meetings, I try and network as much as I can. So I always, whenever I go to a particularly exciting talk, I will always introduce myself to the person after the meeting. And I also find that it's a useful recruiting tool in terms of getting really strong people to be part of the group where I currently work. So if I go to somewhere and there's someone who has a really great presentation, I'll go up to him or her afterwards and introduce myself and, tell them what I really liked about their presentation, and with the hopes that one day maybe our paths will cross again and maybe they'll come and work with me, which is kind of fun and exciting. And I also have benefited very much from mentor relationships, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in my next few slides. But I can't emphasize enough how much good and even unfortunate mentoring relationships have been in my career, because I've been able to learn from the failed mentors just as much as the successful relationships that I've had professionally like that. So I think that, and also it's not about having a single mentor, in my opinion. It's about having a group of people who can help you in a variety of ways and have a variety of perspectives to help you make it through the day, pretty much. And as far as my personality goes, most of the time, right now I'm getting over a cold, so I probably sound a little fuzzier than I'd like to, but most of the time I have a relentless optimism, and that has come in handy more than once during my really bad days, always trying to figure out what's the best for the institution, what's the best for me, and trying to empathize with other people, what might be going on to cause them, some grief or some trouble during the workplace. So just being relentlessly optimistic, not letting timelines get me down, that's been really helpful. I also try very hard to recognize people in meaningful ways. So that means I don't just say, oh, you know, Nancy, I heard that you had a really nice webinar, really good, you know, presentation, something a little superficial. I try and be very direct with examples, and I also try and acknowledge people publicly, not just through email, so something that's a little bit more personal. I also feel that I've been able to build a lot of trust just by being more myself. So whenever you're in a leadership position, you're, you know, to some extent you're filling a specific role. You know, it's your job to do X, Y, or Z, lead the team, make this happen. But I think, you know, being open and honest and transparent, sometimes that makes people very nervous. But I also think that it helps people understand you and your motivations, and it helps you be a cohesive team, so it's not an us and them kind of experience as part of the leadership team. It's all of us together, and that's something that I try and emphasize as much as possible. And I also am very transparent, especially around decision-making processes. You know, what's my role, and what's my role with the other AULs, what's my role with my department heads, what's my role with individuals, and what's my role with my boss, the Vice Provost of University Libraries, and what is my boss's responsibility with her boss, the Provost. So I think just helping people understand the context, and it's not necessarily the bureaucracy, it's how you know, understanding that process, it helps people understand how we fit into the organization, and also how we're, you know, either being strategic with our decisions, or how our decisions help us be in alignment with the broadest interpretation of the university. And that is very frustrating to people. Sometimes it's a very slow process, but I think that people really value that. Because they've told me so, and especially with people who are new to the organization, you know, I'm still one of those people trying to figure out what the organizational structure is, and who does what, and who to contact. I think just mentioning the process just to provide clarity has been very, very helpful for people, and also saying no has a huge impact, or saying not yet or not right now is sometimes a different way to soften what needs to happen. But sometimes we just can't do everything all the time. And when you think about your career and your trajectory, sometimes you have to say no because it's the right decision. Even though it might be a really fun opportunity, you might not have time for it, and it might not help you get to the next phase in your career. And so an example when I had to say no, I have a second master's degree in GIS, and I thought that I was going to be a map librarian after I was a science librarian. That's where I thought I was going. And so I was, you know, part of the ALA Emerging Leaders program in 2013, and I was involved with the Map and Geospatial Information Roundtable, or McGirt, and they sponsored my Emerging Leaders program, and I was the chair of some subcommittees, and they asked if I would be the chair of McGirt, which would be a 3-year commitment and lots of travel and lots of learning of the bureaucratic nature of ALA, because lots of people need to know certain things at the right time. And, you know, I'd already committed 2 years to the organization, and I could already sense myself moving into a different direction. And so I really, really wanted to say yes. I worked really closely with lots of people who were part of McGirt, but in the end I ultimately had to say no because it wasn't the right fit. And that's, you know, now that it's been, you know, 3 or 4 years since I've made that decision, I know it was the right decision, but that doesn't mean that it was easy. So it's really difficult in a lot of ways. to make sure that you're saying no, not knowing what the future holds. And I do want to talk about mentors just a little bit more, because before I had a mentor, I didn't know that I had been exposed to mentoring relationships. I thought that mentoring was very formal and very articulated and very much constrained. But once I found out more what a mentor really is, I realized that I'd been in these mentoring relationships basically since I was in graduate school. And so, you know, I'm really interested to know what kinds of mentoring relationships you all have had and what's worked for you. But I found that those informal ones tend to be better, at least for me, because it helps me think of many people as my mentors. So, you know, who am I inspired by? Who do I know when I have this problem? Who do I go to? I think that that's been very very helpful. And you know, there's certain people that I go to for, you know, policy questions and policy advice, and just trying to learn from them how they get through all of the processes that need to be in place to make the organization go. That's been really helpful. And one of the newer mentors in my life, she's someone that I go to when it comes to personnel issues. And so, you know, people are very dedicated and motivated, and I truly believe that people are trying to do their best for the organization. And then as someone in a leadership position who provides, you know, leadership and strategic direction, not everybody agrees with me, and I don't necessarily believe in consensus in my current institutional context. What this mentor has done for me is she's described to me, not in great detail, but in some detail, how, you know, she thinks that the 80-20 rule, which is a rule that librarians love to apply to our collections, also applies to personnel in terms of, you know, happiness and agreement with policies and things like that. So, you know, if I think something is great and generally, you know, people, you know, want to move forward on it, it's not going to make everybody happy, but as long as the 80-20 rule is appropriate and applied to the situation, then, you know, it checks out, and that's how she moves forward. I like to get a little closer to the 90-10 rule maybe, or make up my own rule, but just, you know, understanding that when you make the right decision, it's not always the easy decision, and not everybody's going to be happy or even agree with you, but clearly articulating why you're making this decision and who the stakeholders are and how you're going to move forward, I think that's been very impactful, at least, you know, for the last 5 years of my career. And I also really like peers and mentors who specifically challenge me. So people who I think are doing some of the coolest things in terms of librarianship, you know, at my institution, nationally, internationally. Those are the people that I look to, and if I have a good day, I like to look at you know, people who are having even better days, and then I want to do better, and I want to be better. And it's also not just in the library world. So I have the ability to interact with, you know, my department heads who are in leadership positions, other associate deans at the college level, associate deans at the school level, vice provosts and vice presidents at, you know, like at the senior leadership team. So going back to what I said earlier about watching people run meetings and operate in a room, that helps challenge me, and it helps me think about how I run meetings. And, you know, if I have a bad meeting, I think, you know, why was that meeting bad? Was I not, you know, in my leadership role? Was I a little bit too informal? Was I unorganized? Was I unprepared? Was it just the wrong time to talk about something? And also, you know, if I have a good meeting, I'll usually jot down, you know, what was good about it and have some action items. One thing that's been, so I don't consider myself particularly tech savvy, but I'm tech comfortable. But one thing that I've started doing just in the last year and a half is I have a, you know, like an 8x10 moleskin lined notebook, and I take it with me absolutely everywhere, and I write down as much as I need to. I can refer to it because I always have it with me, and then if I have an action item, I'll just put a little box that hopefully someday will have a check mark in it. And that helps me keep track of things, and since I have it in a meeting, if people want to know more about a specific topic that I mentioned, I can flip back and go through and articulate some of the significant takeaways that I had. So that's helped keep me organized, and also it's something that, you know, like I said, if I have a good experience or a bad experience, I can write it down and then reflect upon it when emotions are a little less intense. And I see Nancy likes the mention of the different types of mentor roles and types. I also have a few books that I have really liked that have especially helped me. So Radical Candor is one of my newer favorite books, and the subtitle is Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity. And that is something that I listened to it on an audiobook, and I almost wished my commute was a little bit longer just so I could listen to the book a little bit more every day. But that book mentions how to be not necessarily a tough boss, but how to not shy away from having difficult conversations with people, because it's also not good for them. So if someone's not in the right role, but they're continually getting positive feedback, that's not really good for anybody because they don't improve, the situation doesn't improve, they're getting mixed signals, it's very confusing. So that was a really, really interesting book for me. Lean In, that's a little bit older, most of you have probably heard about that, but it's how to, I really liked that because I was able to take away how to be, you know, why it's important to be engaged beyond the 9-to-5 kind of role. The first 90 days is about how to quickly embrace a new role, and they also mention how the first 90 days kind of makes or breaks your career, so there's a little bit of a time crunch. I would say it's best to read that before you accept a job, because that's really helpful to know how to prepare moving into a new role. I know when I became the interim library director, I was able to read that book before I started the position. So, you know, between the time I got the verbal offer and between my start date, I was able to squeeze in a book to help kind of accelerate my learning. Search Inside Yourself is a book by the Jolly Good Fellow of Google, and it's more about self-reflection, and it helped me to be able to empathize with people and understand their struggles and not internalize it. And if you're someone who has trouble leaving work at work, so if you're taking work home, I recommend this book. It really helped me. And then the College Administrator's Survival Guide, that's one of the newer books that I'm reading, and since my role is largely administrative, it's helpful for me personally, but it also helps me empathize with the other administrators. So when I think about, you know, my boss, when I think about the vice presidents, when I think about deans, and when I think about the provost, that's helped me, you know, like I said, empathize and provide a little bit more context. And it looks like Howard is saying another good book is Marshall Goldsmith's What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Oh, that sounds like a really good one. Oh, excuse me. Maybe that'll be on my my next slide if I ever do this presentation again. But thanks for that. I think, books are something that I go to, not because I'm a librarian. I'm not going to make a joke about that, but it's something that I think helps to de-escalate some of the high emotions that can be involved in, moving, applying, just the job searching process, and also, at the end of the day, if you've had a tough day or if you're dealing with, difficult personnel, I like books because I can sit and reflect and discuss them only if I want to. Some days can be very long, as most of you probably know too. And somebody else is sending Boundaries for Leaders by Dr. Henry Cloud. Nice. Going to get them through my library or ILL probably right after this presentation. So developing who comes next is something that I've started to work on. So I've been able to do quite a bit of hiring in my AUL role at UB, and also when I was the interim library director, or when I was at the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. I was able to be search committee member, search chair, hiring manager, and right now I'm, more in the hiring manager role. But one thing, when I think about how I've been able to advance, fairly rapidly through the leadership ranks in my time as a librarian, I've thought about what opportunities I've had to do that, because even if you have the skills required, sometimes you don't have the 5 years leadership experience, and that's something where if you don't meet the, at least, working in a state system, I know that all of our HR systems are different and nuanced, but working in the state system, it's more similar to the federal system, where if you don't meet the required qualifications, you're out. And so when I write job descriptions now, I think about, do I really need 5 years leadership experience in an academic library, or is 3 years of leadership experience or management experience anywhere enough? And then I can focus on, some of the other skills that are more important that you can't necessarily teach. And that's actually how I got my first job as the head of the science library at the College of Worcester, because I had management experience and teaching experience through being a residence hall director and by being a resident assistant in undergraduate days. So I was able to say, well, it's not, you didn't require leadership experience in a library, but since I have leadership experience in other areas, I'm well suited for this job. So looking at those transferable skills and making sure that, you have, the right kinds of experience, and also assessing failed searches or learning from others' failed searches. Why was it failed? Did you have a great candidate, but maybe you required, a degree that was too specialized? I think that that's something that's really worthy of a lot of attention, because hiring the right people is hugely impactful. Hopefully for the good, but also it could be negative. A negative experience if you don't have the right person, or if you don't set the person up for success. I also enjoy creating opportunities who want to advance, and sometimes it's as simple as, having a conversation with someone, where do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years? Is this it? And if your current position is where it's at, how do I help you be the best where you're at and get a lot of satisfaction where you are? And if it's not, what kinds of opportunities do you need to get to that next phase? Is it chairing a search? Is it, having some leadership internally? Is there some external organizations where you could, learn or apply leadership skills? And really, getting to know the people I work with and knowing what motivates them and what's next for them, and helping them feel satisfied in their work. I also try to focus on employee abilities and not necessarily hierarchy or seniority. Sometimes that's difficult, especially since we're in a unionized faculty environment. At least that's where I am now. So it's being very intentional and having lots of good reasons when it's, if there's something where people are competing, it's, you know, who's going to benefit the most from this experience, and then that's how that's what helps guide my decision. And I am not a perfect person. I'm not a perfect boss or supervisor or leader or whatever title people want to ascribe to me, but I'm very frank about what I'm not very good at, and so I will ask for help. And if it's something where, you know, maybe I'm not the best fit, or if it's something that other people are clearly better at than me, and if they want to do it, that's something where I love working closely with lots of different people and learning from them, letting them learn from me. And I can't do everything, and I don't want to do everything. So that's where, you know, if something is not my strength and if others can contribute, I love that opportunity. I think that that's healthy and good for the organization as well. And I also want to acknowledge that, you know, part of the reason that I've been able to advance is because I've had the ability to move. And I know not everybody has the ability to move quickly. So I was at the College of Worcester for 2 years, I was at ESF for 5 years, and I've been at UB now for almost a year. So, you know, I've had to move a lot. I'm not even originally from New York, which is something that people always ask. I've had a lot of support from my partner. I have 2 young children, and so my partner was a stay-at-home dad for, you know, the last 6 years up until 2 weeks ago. I've also been able to work for institutions that have supported my professional development, so I haven't had to pay much out of pocket for my own professional development, which is something that I know fewer and fewer of us seem to enjoy, even though it tends to be part of our requirement as librarians to have this service orientation. I've also been able to invest in my own personal education. So like I said, I got a second master's degree at a time where I wasn't at an institution that had continuing education benefits. And I've also had supportive leadership and mentors. So, you know, my first 2 library directors to whom I reported, they were always willing to listen to my ideas, throw a little bit of money for projects that I wanted to pursue my way, and if things didn't work out very well, they would, you know, help me understand why things failed and how to avoid that in the future, or how to, you know, apply what I've learned to future projects. And so you know, that's really meant a lot to me, to have people who believed in me and didn't necessarily judge me and understood that I was new and excited, and they were trying to capitalize on, you know, that energy and that excitement. And I know that some people aren't as fortunate to have supportive leadership or positive mentors, or, you know, a library director who can pay individuals much attention. And so that's another thing that I keep in the back of my mind, and that's why I have an open door policy. Even if it's a busy day, I'll keep my door open, and people will pop in and say hi, or have a longer conversation, follow up on an email. I think that's the least that I can do for folks in terms of being available. So shortcomings. All right, so I want to leave just a little bit of time for questions. So I remember my first performance review, the only negative feedback I got was that someone recommended that, I wish I had the quote in front of me right now, but it was something where they said, Jessica could learn to value the opinions of others a little bit more. And that's something that has stuck with me since 2010, because I understood how that could be perceived, but I really do care about people, and I care about what they say, even if I don't fully acknowledge it, and even if I disagree with them. And honestly, like, hearing people with different perspectives that I absolutely disagree with, that really helps shape my own thinking, and not in a you are absolutely wrong kind of shapes, but in, you know, have I really thought this idea through? You know, do I really think this is right after having this conversation? So that's something where I've slowly but surely come to appreciate process more so than I had been. Most of you have probably taken some type of personality test or leadership personality test. So I think there's a direction one, there's an animal one, there's the Myers-Briggs one that's not necessarily leadership. There are tons of different types of personality tests, and I don't know if I even fill them out correctly, but I tend to be very, very action-oriented or task-oriented. You know, there's a thing, I want to do the thing, and the thing needs to be done, and then I can move on to the next thing. But as I've been, you know, more discreetly in a leadership position rather than, you know, kind of leading from the bottom or leading from the middle, I've finally understood what it is to be process-driven and why process is important and why conversations are important, even if it's, you know, the 10th hour talking about the reference desk and staffing models for the reference desk. So it's helping to understand, you know, like why I'm the way I am, why that's important to me, why it doesn't need to be important to me, and why it's about giving everybody the chance to operate in a way that makes sense to them. So that's something that I still don't feel like I'm very good at it, but at least I know it's a problem, and so I'm trying to work on it. And also, timing challenges are very interesting in leadership, because I don't know if you've discovered this, but you know, you're essentially the bottleneck. So if you need to make a decision, if something needs to be signed, if you need to think about something or involve the stakeholders or pull together a meeting, many times you are the bottleneck. And so when it's time to say yes to something, that means you're usually saying no or pausing other things. So that's where it's one thing if I overburden myself, but if I overburden or delay others' progress, that's something that I haven't quite figured out yet. And part of it is just the scale of this institution that I'm still trying to figure out. If any of you know me, or as you get to know me, I'm sure you'll find many, many more shortcomings, but those are some that I am you know, happy to acknowledge that I have I'm aware of and I'm currently working on. So to review this long rambling webinar, and thanks to you all for hanging in there and for the conversation on chat. I've had a strong plan loosely held for the positions that I've been in, trying to think strategically about what to say yes to, what to say no to. So I really thought I was going to be a map librarian. Turns out I'm not. So how does one change and adapt given the variety of opportunities that come our way? I think I've been able to surround myself with people who challenge me and encourage me in very positive ways. I haven't been around a lot of people who just say, yeah, you're awesome, go do whatever you want. It's, you know, many times it's, you know, trying to rein me in or, you know, shape me or guide me a little bit. And I think that's been helpful. I've been able to say yes to a lot of really cool opportunities that have helped me, and I've said no to opportunities that I just haven't had time for, or they just weren't right for me in my career, even though they were really, really great. And those are some of the most difficult decisions for me. So again, thank you for attending. If you want to see my extremely out-of-date ORCID profile, there's my number. I've got a lot of social media updating to do. It's my winter project for this year. But I wonder, for those of you who might want to stick around for another 10 minutes, what drives you to be a leader? So for those of you who are thinking about advancing, you know, why do you want to do that? What motivates you? And for those of you who maybe aren't necessarily sure, you know, where you're headed, maybe think about, or, you know, respond to the question, what do you appreciate in leadership? So, you know, thinking about leaders in your life right now, what do you appreciate that they do? What do you notice about them, and is that something that you think would work for you? And on the other hand, we only have 10 minutes left, so if anybody wants to leave for lunch, that's totally fine, I understand, but I will be here for a little bit longer. So while we're waiting, I'm going to write down the titles. So there's the Boundaries for Leaders by Dr. Henry Cloud. And that was a recommendation by Kelly. Okay, so there is a question here from Nancy. She says, was tenure ever an issue in terms of having or not having? So I've been on the tenure track since I started as a librarian. I haven't gotten it yet. And so for me, my most recent job, I came in at the associate level without tenure, which means I have a 3-year contract. And since I'm still part of the same SUNY or State University of New York family, my time at SUNY ESF essentially, you know, carries over. So they'll look at my full publication history, my full CV, not necessarily the 1.5 years I have at UB. Part of my role here at UB is the people in my unit who are faculty and on the tenure track, I prepare the dossiers for them. And so not having tenure, initially there were a lot of questions about who's going to be doing the dossier, what's that going to be like, what if Jessica doesn't get tenure. But I think I'm able to empathize with people, and what I focus on and tell people is trajectory, because you're not supposed to achieve tenure and then stop. So what does your trajectory look like? What does my trajectory look like? And it's my job to make the case as clearly as possible to our external review board. So it hasn't necessarily been a problem. My previous institution, I was in some very, very difficult conversations where I was very nervous to say the right things because I didn't have tenure. So the long story short, for me personally, tenure has not been an issue in terms of not having it. Of course, it'd be really nice to have it, especially since I moved here and everything. But it's also, yeah, so for me, tenure is not a problem, but I can see for some people how it could be a problem. But that, I believe, really depends on the nature of the institution and also the support network. So, you know, for me, it's about working closely with my boss, and if the 10 or 20% of the employees in my unit, you know, don't necessarily agree with me, and even though they're going to be voting on my tenure case, that's something that I'm comfortable with, because I believe I'm making the right decisions. I can document that, and my boss is very supportive of me. So that's something to keep in mind. I have no, you know, I don't know what everybody's tenure case is like, but we have a unit vote. So my unit is research, education, and outreach. So all faculty that have tenure get to vote on my case, and that's just yet another piece of information that's part of my final dossier. So if I don't have a unanimous yes vote, I understand that, and that's okay. It would be, yeah, thanks. Nancy, what institution are you from? Okay, so while we're waiting, Marshall Goldsmith is the other book, and that title is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. We should start a leadership book group next. That would be interesting for ALA. Okay, so Nancy's from Austin, PA State University, which is in Tennessee. Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody for hanging in. I think we're done, and I'm going to hand it over to Ray.
Thanks, Jessica. Thank you all for attending the session. Unfortunately, I had another meeting, so I will watch the recording in a bit. But I did catch the last bit about starting a leadership book discussion. That's something to think about. Again, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jessica, for this awesome presentation. We'll send the recording out soon, and if you are going to Midwinter, stay tuned for a program on building leadership through linked data. All right, have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Ray.